darkness of my room, I sit alone. Tears falling heavy, my heart turning stone. Thought we had a love like no other before.
We're here for an episode of the Relationship Convo podcast. I'm your co-host, Lindsay.
Lamar Waster, thank you for joining us.
And today we have licensed therapist, Kendra Capalbo.
Tell us a little about yourself.
My name's Kendra, as they said, and I am a licensed social worker, but I specialize in couples work. So my whole practice is based on seeing couples. I live in Connecticut, but my practice is primarily in Boston clients, but licensed in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Connecticut.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what happens a lot of times in our relationship is that the behavior triggers the other person's core emotion, and then they come up to a secondary emotion and a behavior, and it loops. So the most common cycle that you see with couples is we call it like a pursuer withdrawer cycle, where one person's kind of pushing and pushing and pushing, the other person's like pulling back. The more you push, the more I pull back. The more I pull back, the more you push, and it creates this like infinity symbol type dance, she'll call it. Sue Johnson called it. She actually just recently passed away, but that's what she would call it. So we're trying to identify what that cycle is in the relationship, because you can't, really fix something unless you understand it first. Try to understand it on a deeper level, and then try to get couples to be able to stop it before they're engaged fully in it. So the way I sort of describe it is if you imagine each person as their own circle, they come together in a cycle. If you can separate the two circles, it's easier to go towards the other person with compassion rather than be triggered by what they're bringing to the table. It's like a complex. My life.
You probably need schooling to truly get the gist of what. Yeah, no, I totally get it. The concept, I totally get it, but the details,
right?
That's why you're the professional. Yeah. So another question. There's a lot of forgiveness, obviously, that's number one in therapy. And, as far as infidelity, you can't move forward without forgiving, I'm assuming anyway. That being said, how do you feel about couples who, when there's one person that feels like, okay, I keep forgiving, that's what you're supposed to do, and it just becomes this cycle of the person cheating, and then they keep forgiving, and nothing really gets resolved?
Oh, well, honestly, like if there's a pattern of repeated cheating, I mean, my advice is it's a characterological cheating, and
you don't work with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even want to be in, like if I had a friend, for example, that was in a relationship where there was infidelity and it was a one-time thing, I might be like, all right, you've got to try to work through that. But if it was repeated, I would be like, get the hell out of there. I wouldn't really be encouraging someone to stay in a relationship like that, if I'm being honest. I think forgiveness, though, is you forgive for yourself. You don't forgive for the other person. You forgive for yourself, because if you don't forgive, you're carrying that burden of that weight. So I think that, if you forgive over and over again, if you're doing it from that perspective of being for yourself, then I think there's a certain peace that comes with that, because it's not for the other person. But you've got to kind of step back from a relationship and ask, why is the pattern such that one person is repeatedly in a position to forgive, or why is it not working in both directions? If one person feels like their small infractions are not being forgiven, and they're always the one that's trying to be the one that forgives, and they need to look at the balance in the relationship.
What's your opinion on unhealthy relationship or abusive relationship? Stay inside of it.
What's on an abusive or unhealthy? Yeah. Is that what you said?
Does somebody stay inside an abusive or unhealthy relationship? What's your opinion?
I mean, I think it depends on the level. Obviously, I would say no. You should always leave an abusive relationship. But what is abusive? I think it's one of those terms that sometimes gets used in relationships where maybe it's just an unhealthy dynamic that could be worked through, and they could learn how to do it better, right? I hear that word get used. I heard it actually a few times this week, or last week rather, where I'm I don't know if I would categorize this as abuse. It feels like a little bit of a strong word for the situation at hand, but I'm not going to, for that person, it feels abusive, right? So I guess they have to determine if it feels like something that the other person could work on and to get to a healthier balance or not. But I don't think anyone should stay in a relationship if they truly feel that it's abusive. if that makes sense. So and if it's like domestic, we're talking about domestic violence or, what I think if pretty much anyone would categorize it as abuse and it's not like a language type thing, then yeah, I don't think people should stay in abusive relationships. Unless the person that's doing the abusing has a lot of insight and is willing to do a lot of work to like get to a place where they're not treating their partner that way.
Have you ever had to help one of your clients get to a safe space?
I worked with a couple a long time ago where I suspected there was domestic violence, and it's contrary to couples therapy. It's conflict of interest to work with a couple under those circumstances. So I encouraged them to not be in a relationship anymore, and then they ended up stopping therapy at that point. But it didn't rise to the occasion where I needed to report anything or anything like that. It was just not a health. It was what I would describe as abusive. And I've worked with couples where I felt like it was emotionally abusive, but I felt like if the individual that was being emotionally abusive could understand themselves enough, there could be change. So in a case like that, I wouldn't stop working with the couple. I'm pretty direct. I call things out pretty obnoxiously, perhaps at times. So I would like call that behavior out. And if the person, is willing to look at themselves and change, then I think it can still work. But physical violence is a different story.
Have you noticed the correlation between your patients and the way your patients' parents maybe function in their relationships?
Yeah, I think you get one of two things. Like either people go in the direction of following suit or they like, try to do the complete opposite. So I've seen both occur. But you definitely see a connection. If someone didn't really see like a warm relationship or a loving relationship, then it might be harder for that person to be expressive of their emotions as an adult, even if they want that or even if they desire to be that way. Like that just didn't learn the skill set. They still can learn it. It's just a little harder, a little more uncomfortable.
Have you noticed? Well, before I ask this question, I want to clarify. So I know that you are a licensed couples therapist, but before getting or deciding that you wanted to work with couples, were you working with children or any other group of people?
I was working with inmates.
Okay, never mind.
A long time ago. Before that, I worked with kids, but
Okay.
I spent 15 years working in a prison and doing therapy on the side, private practice therapy on the side, and then just really felt drawn to the couples therapy thing. So eventually kind of created a full-time practice on the side of working at the prison and then left the prison. I like to say I escaped. It's a little prison joke.
Yeah.
What are some effective strategies for couples to keep the spark alive in long-term relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent that's a little bit dependent on the couple, right? Because people need, different things. But I think that we stop dating our partners, and I think that's a problem, So I think that things even as simple as like going on dates, like really actually asking your partner to go on a date, not just, you live together, so what do you want to eat tonight? I don't know, let's go out. Like that's not a date to me. Like a date is, hey, can I take you out on Friday night, and creating a little bit of that anticipation. And then the romance, like just the same way that you create that when you're first dating someone, there's a newness and like an excitedness to see the person. And, I think we stop doing the things that work in the beginning of relationships because we get complacent. So I think trying to like never get complacent and become really mindful of, relearning our partner. And that's one of the things the Gottmans found, is that a lot of times couples that have been together for a really long time actually know each other less than couples that are dating, because couples that are dating are curious about each other, right? So you're asking those questions, you're trying to get to know the person, and then you almost reach a point where you're like, I already know you. Like you're like old news. And like we just get like bored of our partners, and you have to like try to keep like reminding ourselves that we're evolving and continuing to ask those questions. I'm a big fan of like just even like a night away, like sometimes just a change of environment can like spark some stuff. Trying to go outside the box a little bit. So if a couple tends to be like, particularly vanilla and, trying to insert maybe some toys or, role play or those kind of things into the relationship just to try something new and keep it, keep it moving a little bit.
Yeah. Who typically requests divorces?
I think it's hard to say because what I see as a couples therapist are couples that are trying to save their relationship. So I'm not going to fully answer your question, but it maybe gets sort of at it. I think that people think that men cheat more than women, and I don't agree with that. And I don't have necessarily like the evidence to prove that. But what I think is that we think that because when a woman cheats, the relationship is more likely to be over, in my opinion. They don't come to couples therapy. Whereas if a man cheats, a woman is more likely to try to maybe look at themselves or look at the relationship and go to couples therapy. So what I see in my practice may look like men cheat more often because they end up in couples therapy, but I don't actually think that that's what it's like representative of. I think it's representative of when a woman cheats, the man leaves. So in that instance with infidelity, it might be, and I don't have the statistics to back this, but it might be that men are more often asked for divorce if their wives cheat versus if a husband cheats, the woman might be more willing to go to couples therapy. In general, I don't know. I think it's probably around 50-50.
Oh, wow.
And I think there's like, so see, I could be totally wrong. Again, remember, I'm not like
But based off your experience.
Yeah, but again, what my experience is that the couples I'm seeing aren't getting divorced because they're trying to work on their marriage, right? So
Okay.
I'm not getting the people that are getting divorced. I'm getting the people that are trying to like do the work to not get divorced.
Right.
So I
Okay.
don't, what I'm seeing is like not the subsect of the population that you'd get that data from. You'd
Right.
get the
I think
data from the people who aren't going to couples therapy, they're getting divorced. And
fair.
I would guess it's
I think
pretty
I was
easy.
just assuming, I was thinking of some dramatic situation in which they're like, you know what, I realize I don't want this anymore right in front of you. And maybe it's not that dramatic. And it
Oh,
doesn't
no,
look
I've never
that
had,
way.
maybe once. I think I had one couple where like their individual, I met with them because I always do like a couple session and then I do an individual with each. And I did their couple session and then she came into her individual session, sat down and was like, I'm filing for divorce. And I was like, all right then. So we're not here to do couples therapy. We're here so that I'm like witness to you telling him you want a divorce. I guess a safer space. But yeah, I don't know if I could extrapolate any statistics based on that one, but
Okay.
I
Well,
have to put my thought on that one.
awkward.
I think it's more 75-25 because women control the opportunity of sex. A man can't have sex unless a woman say yes, or it's the R word. And I also feel men pick and choose. A man could pick a very non-attractive woman and sleep with her and not have feelings. And I feel a lot of men do sleep with women that they don't feel any attraction for. So I think it's more 75-25. I think women cheat more than men because they control the opportunity of sex.
you think, wait, so you lost me a little bit. So you think women cheat more than men because they have more opportunity?
They got more control because they get to say
They-
yes. They got to tell a man, yes, yes, you can sleep with me. Yes, you can come over.
But don't men need to consent too?
Yes, but a man don't have no control over that because a man can walk to a girl like, I think you're very attractive. She can be like, ew, go about business.
But it could go the other way around too.
Like, come on, how like is that? Like, for example, how many guys get bought drinks at the bar? I mean,
There are some women who are forward and they will buy you drinks. I'm not one of them, but I do know some and they'll do it.
See?
Yeah. You know
Drinks
what?
like $20 here. I'm not buying a drink.
So expensive these days. So an interesting thing that this might surprise you is that so you're even where you're headed, there's like the sort of idea that men want sex all the time and it's the woman that has the headache. My practice, I see the opposite. I have more couples where they're coming to couples therapy because the woman is not satisfied with the amount of sex that they're having and the man is just not interested. And it's not, and genuinely it's not like just not interested in sex. Like it's, and then there's all the issues that come along with that because society tells us over and over and over again that men want sex all the time. So they, of course, internalize it. He thinks there's something wrong with him because he doesn't want to have sex. She thinks there's something wrong with her because he's supposed to want to have sex with her all the time. So I think that some of what we think is going on from gender stereotype perspective is actually not accurate. But people don't talk about that. Men aren't going around saying to their friends, I don't want to have sex, because they'd be shamed if they said that. And women don't want to tell their friends their husband doesn't want to have sex with them because all the, their friends are talking about how they don't want to have sex. Right. But I think there's a lot of things that we think are one-sided that are actually more balanced than we might realize.
Women are, it's kind of maybe segue. Women are often blamed for the reason why a marriage didn't work. They didn't have enough sex with them. They didn't cook enough. They didn't look good after having their kids. I'm not saying this is always the case, but it is something that I think society we hear. She had 6 kids, and why doesn't she look like, she's 22 anymore? So is this actually something that you have seen where men are just like, just not, it's kind of her fault?
No, but again, like, I think that, what I'm getting in couples therapy is maybe different than I don't know that you can necessarily take what I see and like extrapolate it out, because I'm seeing the people that are like still trying to work on their relationship. But I would say, quite honestly, in the individual sessions I do, I more often hear the woman saying that she's not attracted to the husband anymore than vice versa. But they still want to have sex because of the intimacy, the closeness. They might not be attracted to him anymore, but they still want that like closeness. Maybe for men, they might not feel comfortable to tell me that. So that might be happening, and they might just feel like they look like a jerk if they say, I don't think she's attracted anymore. I have heard it, but like maybe it could be a bias that they're uncomfortable telling me that because I'm a woman, but I've heard it many times from the women.
What you just said remind me of a video I seen the other day, and basically the girl was on a date with some other dude at some like little cheap restaurant, probably KFC or something like that. It's a very cheap restaurant. Her husband came with an apron on and served them the food that they ordered, that they was waiting for, and he shook the guy's hand and all that. It's like, y'all good? When you walk away, she got on the floor, begging him to stay, stuff like that. So my opinion, if she don't really want the guy, why would she beg the guy when she realized, this guy's really gonna leave me?
I think it happens in both directions. I think when push comes to shove, people kind of talk a big game until, their partner's like, all right, you want it to be over, it's over. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, I don't know that that's really what I want. I think a lot of times we don't know what we want until we're in the situation of it, like potentially being gone. And I think a lot of times people think that they're in like more of a power position than they are. And so in that situation, like she might have felt like she was in the power position. And then when he flipped a switch on her and was like, that's fine. Like all of a sudden she's not in that position anymore, and it changes her perspective.
Do you feel like the answer to some of these issues that you see in couples therapy is an open relationship or open marriage?
I think that's a tricky question because I think it can work but I think it takes so much more work to make that kind of a relationship structure work than even in a like monogamous relationship. And people aren't really doing very well with like communication with one person. Now you're adding like other people in the mix. I think it takes like a really healthy unit relationship to be able to expand beyond that. I think it can. I think it absolutely can work, and I think theoretically it can answer some of those problems. But the amount of communication needed to be able to do that in a healthy manner is a lot. And people, like I said, 2 people are having trouble like even communicating clearly, and now you add more people into the mix. It's like another, other sets of feelings. And I think sometimes people don't think about that there's like other sets of emotions that you're adding to the equation that need to be considered. They're people too.
I did an interview recently, and the girl used the word conscious. So I'm gonna use that word I'm trying to go with. So basically, do you feel women are more conscious or more masculine in the relationships?
More conscious. How? I don't understand that. What was the context that she?
So do you feel women are more conscious, more aware of their surroundings, more aware of dating, more aware of what men got to offer, or are they more masculine, where they want to take more control, be more in charge of relationships?
I mean, I definitely think that maybe as a whole, like society might be moving a little bit more in the direction where women are finding a little bit more of their power, and they're asserting it. I think with anything, a lot of times in our society, we go from one extreme to the other before we find like the middle ground. And so I think we maybe are like a little bit in a space of that. But I think that, there's women that fall in both sides of that, for sure, or a mix of both, and I think that that's kind of the healthy space is like a nice, mix of both.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be weird, or maybe not. I'm sure you've heard worse. Is porn a problem?
No doubt. Yoga community has went from, hey, check out my bakasana to check out my backside.
Yeah,
in these yoga pants, right?
A lot of yoga pants pics.
Booty. Just booty alone is an industry.
It is a giant industry
on Instagram.
Yeah.
So what happens is you wake up in the morning, you check your notifications, then your homie tags you, yo, look at this chick. Boom.
Right.
Now you have an erection. What's the first thing you do? You're like, let me go to my browser, open the incognito browser and hit Pornhub. Boom. Now you out of here, right? Now your day's done. You just depleted your energy, right? And this coming out in my book where I talk about, why you shouldn't jerk off and all that stuff. But
you write that you shouldn't jerk off?
Yeah.
Never?
Well, there's a calculation.
You have a jerk off algorithm?
Yeah, there's a jerk off algorithm. It's created by the Taoist sexology. And I think it's your age times 2. No, your age divided by 2 times 100. I forget what it is. It's in my book. I can't remember it. But I got it from the Tao, right? Which is why I don't have it memorized. It's age times 0.2. I think it's age times 0.2. And then to tell you how many days, right? So at my age, I'm 38 now. My age, it's about 7.5 days between ejaculation to maintain who I am.
Really?
Yeah. And
damn.
Yeah. So a man's strength is his balls.
In relationships.
Yeah, my theory on anything really that you could bring up is that something's a problem if it's a problem to that couple, right? So I don't believe in a right or wrong for a relationship. I believe that the couple has to define it and they have to be on the same page with it. And what I often see is that they don't talk about it. And then all of a sudden they find, someone's looking at porn, using porn, and then all of a sudden it's a problem. But like really the problem is they didn't talk about whether or not porn was viewed as a form of infidelity or not. So I don't think it's right or, I don't personally, I'm a firm believer of course I'm going to like blank on the word, but, conscientious porn. Like I think that there are some problems with the porn industry, but I think that, can't believe I'm like blanking on the word I'm looking for, but, there's some ethical porn, where they're really making sure that the girls are of age or I think it's more often an issue with the women, but that the people that are participating are of age, they're consenting, it's not under any sort of duress or anything like that. As long as that's in place, I have no problem with porn. But in a relationship perspective, it's only a problem if it's a problem for one person or it hasn't been discussed. So in and of itself, I don't think it's a problem.
I actually asked this question one time before, and the thing the guest had a problem with was, like you said, the efficacy of it. So they didn't like they partner to watch schoolgirls or somebody pretending to be a teenager or family porn, incest porn. They didn't like that kind of stuff. So if they see their partner watching stuff like that, they'd be like, would you want to sleep with your sister? Would you want to sleep with your family member? That's why they didn't like it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you say?
I said that's totally valid.
Yeah, and again though, like I think it's like those are the things that need to be discussed, and I think that in healthy relationships, if people can really talk about sex and their preferences and their fantasies and all of that in a very like open way, then before you're in that situation, whether or not that's something that again your partner's gonna be comfortable with or not comfortable with, and then I think there has to be a respect for what your partner's boundaries are. So if if one person believes that, the use of porn is like a violation of their sort of contract of being in a relationship, then, it's a problem. But if they both agree that it's fine, or maybe the discussion is, to your point, like, well, what kind of porn is okay? Like, is, porn as long as it's ethical and it's, not, it's whatever, the people look like they're of age and it's not a family member, you know, it's like maybe vanilla porn, for lack of a better way of putting it, then maybe like it's fine. But, you know, I do think people have the right to be able to say what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. And I think most times when porn's an issue, it's because it's being hidden and not talked about. And then it feels like a violation.
You notice couples coming in because their relationship just isn't the same since they had children?
Yeah, I think most people's relationships change when they have kids. I think that that's normal. I think it's what do you do with that? You know, I think that it makes sense that, you know, the priority kind of goes to the kids for a while. But I think that, you know, from my perspective, and obviously I'm biased because I'm a couples therapist, but I really think that the relationship is the nucleus of everything else in your life. And if you have a healthy relationship with your partner or partners, if you know, are polyamorous, that structure like radiates out. So if you have, you know, in a sort of heterosexual monogamous couple situation, if that is a healthy relationship, the kids will benefit from that. It's a benefit to them, right? But like I think sometimes people focus entirely on the kids, lose sight of the relationship, and then they're not modeling, you know, a healthy relationship. They drift apart, maybe divorce happens, what have you. But, you know, I think it changes, but you can consciously make an effort to maintain the relationship as a priority. If you're conscious of it.
Okay. So that was kind of a segue into another question. So I saw a statistic recently, and I don't remember the actual numbers, but basically what it said was lesbian relationships actually tend to be a little bit more fair because there isn't that power struggle or that gender bias of, well, you take care of the kids and I go to work, vice versa. In lesbian relationships, typically the kids get what they need, and then both people in the relationship are able to work on their careers and everything is equal. So I'm just curious, I'm not sure about the orientations and the types of couples that you have come in, but in your experience, have you noticed anything like that?
Not, I don't think I've worked with enough lesbian couples who had children, I'll say that,
Okay.
to really be able to speak on it. I think there's parts of it that make sense. But again, like I think there's plenty of heterosexual couples where, you know, the men are stepping up and there's, you know, the dynamics either reversed or it's balanced. So I think that can absolutely exist. But I don't know, it's interesting. It makes that there's parts of it that make sense.
Do you
Yeah.
see a power struggle in the couples therapy? Are you seeing more arguments because of like gender stereotypes or different things that kind of like bleed into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like, I think like power struggles in whatever way you want to define them, because I think they show up in different ways in relationships, but I think they're always kind of there in relationships, you know,
Period,
in
no
one
matter who you.
other. Yeah, like I think
Okay.
I think that it's something that you have to really be like aware of the potential for them to be able to be communicating well enough that they don't become a problem. And I think the other thing is that a lot of times in the beginning of a relationship, that dynamic might work for both people. And then as a relationship goes on, it doesn't work anymore for either person, but the dynamic is so like ingrained that it's hard to kind of move away from it. Right. So if you look at the beginning of why would anyone get in a relationship where there's maybe like that sort of a power difference, you wouldn't get into it unless there was like something that felt good about it. And so it often feels good in the beginning. And then at some point it doesn't feel good anymore. And it's being able to like navigate that and adjust when it doesn't feel good for either party or both parties anymore.
Okay. I think I was thinking of it, and I'm sorry, and then I think I was also thinking about the fact that like in history, you know, men take care of women, right? And I'm not saying whether that should be the case or it doesn't. I personally like being independent and having an equal partner, but I think something that we're just starting to talk about as a society, because like you mentioned, women are more conscious of, you know, what's going on and the rights that we have and the power that we do have, where, you know, they're like, okay, you know, I really did like him making the money, but now I'm like, you know, I have to ask him for money, or even if it's the other way around, there are some women that work and the men stay at home and they take care of the kids, and then the husband is like, you know, not a fan of this anymore because I come home and you talk to me like I'm the maid, you know. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking about. But I will say, I believe history-wise, it's been the other way around. Men take care of everything, and the woman kind of just has to sit and be like, well, that's what he said. He makes the money, he makes the rules, etc.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely do see that, and I have some couples where there's, pretty substantial differences in income that you see that a lot with. I think it's shifting. I think it's shifting.
Okay, that's interesting though. That is shifting.
You got a
I
lot
hope
of
it's
that's
shifting.
needing this right now, only because OnlyFans.
Say that again?
A lot of females became millionaires during COVID because of OnlyFans.
Because I mean, but a lot of women are doing very well because of their brains too, and
Not definitely, not
I've had
You
some
walked into that one.
women that are holding it down in the business world and are just as powerful, and they just don't necessarily get, I think, a lot of times as many opportunities because they're female. But yeah, I've known a few, maybe not billionaires, but I've definitely had a few clients that are female millionaires and their husbands are the ones staying home. And I think it does maybe like sometimes that dynamic, I think sometimes is a little harder, maybe to your point where you're headed, Lindsay's like that. I think that sometimes is more difficult for the man to accept being on that side of the dynamic than maybe what I see in the other way. Like there's still some resistance in the more traditional where the man's the provider and the woman's staying home. But I think because it's been sort of more accepted by society for historically, like it's maybe easier for women to accept, but the reverse seems harder. All men, like not all men, I should never generalize like that, but I hear a lot of men say they want that dynamic. They want, the wife that works and takes care of them. But when it really actually happens, I think sometimes they feel, emasculated, and it creates some issues.
I know guys like that have women take care of them. They usually go for like the woman that's like 60 years old, 70 years old.
So sugar mamas.
Yeah, they buy them Cartiers and Gucci and stuff like that. Like, so what's crazy is the one person I'm talking about, she live in Jersey right now, and he live in Wisconsin, and she bought his bed and everything. A whole nother state, bought his bed and everything.
Oh. That sounds cool.
I mean, if it works for both of them, like if they,
Right. Definitely works for them.
if they know that that's what's happening, as long as there's not like, I think it gets like sketchy when it's like the acting and the sort of like inauthentic, like if you're straight up about, I don't think there's a right or wrong. So people are straight up about what they're doing in relationships. I think it's all good. It's when it's like, we're showing one thing and what's happening behind this, behind the scenes is different.
And what's funny about that is he was in jail. He was gonna be paroled to her house. So the warden and the CEOs, they didn't like the fact that she was like 7 years old and he was gonna be paroled. So they like, he's using you. They had a meeting. The warden, him, like the doctor, like the nurse, everybody was in the room talking with her like, yo, he's using you. And she's like, no, we've been together for 10 years. Like, and like they let him be paroled to her house. But at first they was not trying to have it.
It's weird. But you're in no judgment zone.
Look, I have the theory of no judgment, and then I have there's then the other side of it, right? Like where, yeah, I'm surprised that they were as involved as they are. I mean, certainly when I worked at the prison, I, had countless stories of things like that I saw. But I think that in that, it's like, does she really know? Like, is he writing to like however many other girls and getting like money put into his like canteen because he's writing to 4 other girls, or is he really like interested in her as like a person? And like, like that's where my judgment comes in, is it's like, if he's being honest and he's saying it is what it is, then, and that's her choice to like decide if she wants that or not. But I think people are naive.
Yeah, very true. Is there one thing, obviously I'll start out by saying that no couple is the same, but in general, is there one thing where you just wish couples would just understand, and so that way they could possibly avoid therapy, couples therapy?
I think just how to communicate, which, oversimplifying it a little bit, but I think that, we tend to, have conversations where we're focused more on what we're going to say than on listening to what the other person's saying. And so I call it like ping pong, where, it's just a back and forth and no one's listening to each other. And if they just stopped and slowed it down a little and really took the time to hear each other like on a deeper level, it would avoid a lot of the conflict that comes up. And then, maybe piggybacking on that, I think the power of like benefit of the doubt, like I think there's so many opportunities in our relationships to where we have like the choice that we can like view it in this way or we can view it in that way. Not for the naive, as I just said. Like I think that there is like sort of seeing things through like the rose-colored glasses, but I think the flip side of that is that people get to a point in their relationship and I call it shit colored glasses. I don't know if you have to edit that out or how clean this is, but like, brown colored glasses or, dark glasses that they don't see through anymore. But like where they, the sort of more formal terminology is like negative sentiment override, where it's like everything the partner does, the person interprets with ill intent, right? It's like, instead of just saying, you know what, the dishes in the sink and my partner must have just been busy and like they were rushing out the door and they just didn't have time to wash it. It's like, oh, they left the dish in the sink because they expect I'm going to clean up after them. What's their problem? That's a choice. How we perceive things, to some extent we have a choice to change. And I think if couples did that more, I'd be out of a job.
I was about to say that a lot of couples, it's always seemed like it's one person that's always trying, one person that's trying hard enough. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that it does seem like there's usually 1%. And that's kind of that EFT thing I was talking about before, that like the pursuer a lot of times is the person that's kind of trying a little bit harder. And then, the withdrawer, maybe they're for different reasons, a lot of underlying reasons, but like maybe not trying as much in the relationship. But then you get that sort of switch, which you also referenced earlier, where all of a sudden the withdrawer, the pursuer stops pursuing and the withdrawer is like, wait, come back, and they'll pursue. Right. So I think that there does tend to be one person, from what I see a lot of times, that one person is maybe a little more invested in trying and the other person needs a little bit of a wake up call before they come to the table to, make the same level of effort.
Because now I just want to know about your prison stint, which is unrelated. So, or actually, okay, all right. How did that happen? You just graduate and say, okay, I'm gonna go work at a prison?
So it's like a longer story, but the short of it. So I was in the Peace Corps. I was in Kingston, Jamaica, which was its own experience. And I think I just really saw like a lot of crime. Kingston's not it's not Ocho Rios. And really just got to know people on like a human level. So there was that, like, I just really saw, maybe people that I knew had done not so great things, really was able to see like the person behind the action and the circumstances that maybe led to it. My dad was a correctional officer, and I think I was always a little bit fascinated. So when I went to grad school, I actually wanted to work with kids. I thought that's what I would end up doing. But we could do an internship, and there was an internship working like at an agency that worked with mostly guys on parole for different things. And I was like, oh, that would be interesting for like a year. Did that for a year, then was like, oh, I'll do an internship working with sex offenders. So did that for a year, and then left there, got hired by the first agency, worked there for a couple years, and then applied at the Rhode Island Department of Corrections and got hired and worked there for 15 years.
Oh, 15. It sounds fulfilling. I mean,
it was in the beginning. It was very fulfilling in the beginning. I loved it. And then, politics get involved. I was a social worker, and politics get involved, and people who don't work in the system get involved, and they like make the changes that like theoretically on paper make sense, but aren't practical in reality, and everything changed and I hated it. So probably the last 10 years I was there, I was unfulfilled because I couldn't work with the clientele that wanted the help. I had to work with who they told me I had to work with. And those were usually the people that didn't really want to like see me, So it was like I like to use my little prison like terminology, but they like, you know, they handcuffed me. I couldn't do my job anymore. So once I couldn't do my job anymore, I'm like, why am I here?
Right.
But 5 years of it, it was I loved it. And I felt like I was actually making a difference. Not like, you know, I'm not saying I was changing, you know, hundreds of lives, but the people that I was working with, I felt like I was making a difference. And then they took away my ability to do that. So,
Did any of your
so
coworkers did any of your coworkers get fired for messing with the inmates?
So there was one social worker that got fired because she got in a relationship with an inmate. And I think so I worked in the men's side, so I think it was less common on my side of things. Rhode Island's really small, so like everything's kind of all together. But so there were, I think, some cases of, I think that happens more often in the female prison.
A youth corrections officer has been arrested, accused of having a sexual relationship with a parolee.
In Michigan, a female deputy is now sitting in a jail cell after an improper relationship with an inmate.
Former detention officer with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office has now been arrested. That's 36-year-old Kawana Jenkins. She's accused of inappropriate behavior with an inmate.
And you got a live ass fucking head game. Oh man. Again, that.
Don't even get me thinking about that. It makes me so horny.
It gets you horny?
Oh yeah.
December 2019, corrections officer Tina Gonzalez cut out a hole in her uniform and had full intercourse with an inmate while 11 others watched on. While this perverted act sent shockwaves across California, what happened next to Gonzalez changed the course of her life forever. Here are 10 dirty female cops caught with inmates.
Where staff get involved with male staff get involved with the female inmates. It's run very differently than the male prison. It's like much more lax. So it's like I think it's easier for things to like cross boundaries in the women's facility, or at least that's how it was when I was there.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I was just so curious when you mentioned it. I'm like, that took a turn, and now you're working with couples. But okay. Well, do you think you'd still be working there if the politics didn't get involved?
It's hard to say. Maybe.
Okay. You wouldn't have been opposed to it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? After 15 years, I might have probably gotten to a place of being like jaded. I see some of the changes that they're making there now, and I wouldn't want to work there. You know, so it's hard to say. Like, if things had stayed exactly how they were when I first started, then I probably would have stayed. But nothing stays the same. Everything changes. So,
I see you do sex therapy. So, how do you approach sex therapy to help your couples discover intimacy, pleasure?
I mean, it's the same really as any other therapy. I think it's just about trying to get couples more comfortable communicating about sex. I think a lot of times couples don't know how to talk about sex, and having somebody else as a third party like normalize the conversation and give permission. I think sometimes people need permission to like try things. You know, it's like, oh, Kendra said we have to, so they're like more willing to do it or something.
Homework.
Yeah, exactly. Like, or I like my favorite assignment, I tell people like, go have bad sex. You know, like if a couple hasn't had sex in a long time, I'm like, go have bad sex, because it takes away all the like stress. You know, the stress is what creates a lot of times creates the problem. And sometimes just like giving them permission to like have a sense of humor about sex and try some new things, and just open up the communication about it. I think a healthy sex life is the one that has really open communication. So I think a lot of what sex therapy is trying to get people just more comfortable to talk about it.
Our session's a little bit awkward sometimes. I know it's your job, but do things come up and you're just like, God, I wish I could sink to the couch right now?
I mean, I'll be honest, like that's where, having worked in a prison for 15 years, kind of like I've heard like far more there that maybe made me like uncomfortable in my seat than in couples therapy.
Okay.
I think, you know, the most awkward conversations are maybe ones where, you know, it is about like one person maybe not being as attracted to the other person, or trying to help them navigate those kind of conversations can be really like awkward or uncomfortable, because you know, you can feel for the person that's being told that, like that's a hard thing to hear. And so that can be like uncomfortable. But I mean, I'm pretty open-minded, not much like weirds me out. I joke that like I really like, for me, like the whole like furry thing is like, I think I'd be uncomfortable if a client came in and said that they were like into furries. Like that's like,
Wait, what's that?
oh gosh, Google it. Like,
Oh God.
Yeah,
Okay.
people that dress like furries, ears and everything.
Oh.
It's a fetish.
Okay.
yeah. And look,
Okay.
to each his own. It's just, I don't, that would be hard. That would be like, I don't, there's something I probably should go to therapy and figure out where it stems from, right? But like that for me, like, I don't know, there's something about that that I like feel very uncomfortable around. But pretty much anything else, like, and
Have
it's
you
just
ever?
about furries, go do your thing. Like, happy for all the furries out there, but like, that would be something that I would feel like uncomfortable to talk about because I don't
Yeah.
understand it. That's a stretch one for me.
Yeah. Have you had sessions where you wanted to giggle?
Yeah, and I do.
Ah!
Don't bite your cheeks.
No, I think it's okay. Like, I think it's like you have to be human in your sessions, and I think that's why clients like me is I think in a lot of ways I'm not like a normal therapist. Like I'm rough around the edges, and I'm not. I say what I see. You know what I mean? I'm pretty direct. I'm not a coddling type therapist. So, I think being human and allowing myself to have human emotions allows them to also. And sometimes there's nervous laughter and yeah.
But people
I
here
can't
like
think of a time, but I would. I know I would giggle if that's what came out.
when your clients hear sex therapy, do they think that they will do something inside the room while you're watching or something?
I've never had someone think that, but I do know that that's like something people think, which is just like bizarre to me.
Aren't there? But I think there's. I don't think.
Are.
Okay, I'm like there is a thing. I swear I've seen it. Not that I was looking.
Yeah.
But I was like, how do you? Okay, well if it works for you, it works for you.
Yeah.
So maybe they just get the terms mixed up.
Yeah. And I think like there was a show and and it was like a mainstream show that like I think made a joke about it one time or something and people thought it was real and then that created some of that. So I've never had anyone think that that's what was going to happen. But I certainly have heard stories from colleagues and stuff where maybe that's what the client thought. I think with couples, and this might be again, like I don't really know that I have anything to base this on, but my colleague friends that work more with individuals tend to get more a little bit out there type requests, right? Like inappropriate, maybe. A colleague was just telling me about like, someone sort of sending inappropriate photos, that kind of thing. I think when you work with a couple, it's less of that. It tends to be more, we're not connecting intimately, or, we don't know, we want to expand sort of things a little bit or be a little less vanilla. It's things like that. It doesn't tend to be as, out of the box as what I think individual therapists might get. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe people, I don't know. Maybe people just don't want to come to me with their weird stuff, so I don't get it.
Little do they know you're the person to come to because you don't judge or, it's not a big deal to you. You worked in a prison for 15 years.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck on that. I'm sorry.
You got a question?
Nope.
This next question, I had to actually look up the word for the next question. It says neurodiversity. The neurodiversity is a framework for understanding human brain function that recognize the diversity of human cognitions as a biological fact. So the question is, what's the big challenges neurodiversity couples face and how do you help them embrace their differences?
So to just kind of simplify it, because I'm sure even the description that you've read is like, a lot of people are going to be like, what are you talking about? So it tends to be like a couple where one or both partners are on the autism spectrum. My sort of take on it though, interestingly, is that I really think in some ways all couples are divergent because you have two people with two different brains and two different ways of thinking. So yes, it is maybe a little bit more extreme when you have one person that is neurotypical, meaning they're not on the spectrum and their partner is on the spectrum. That's a little bit more, like two sides of the spectrum, right? But I think all of us like have to work through the struggles of not thinking through life the same way that our partner does. I think that, with neurodiverse couples, a lot of times the partner that's on the spectrum is like more concrete and linear, and maybe sometimes can have like a lower frustration tolerance, which is something that ends up coming up a lot with the couples that I see with that are neurotypical. I'm sorry, are neurodiverse. So just trying to learn how to bridge the gap so that they know when the problems that are occurring in the relationship are related to that versus when they're just having like regular couples therapy type issues, and how to sometimes set up different ways of communicating or structuring things. Like one thing that I have a lot of couples do when one person is on the spectrum is sometimes there's like a challenge moving from one thing to the next. So what I would see a lot of times with couples is that the neurodivergent partner might get out of work, and especially during COVID, if they were like working from home, and then they would go right into their home life, and there was not the space to kind of decompress and switch gears. And there would a lot of times be conflict in those periods of time. So that was something that once identified, we could say like, okay, take 10 or 15 minutes after work and do whatever to kind of switch gears and then re-enter the home. So just coming up with different strategies to allow things to move a little more smoothly.
Speaking of the pandemic, did you have a lot of couples during that time?
Yeah, I mean, my husband jokes all the time that the pandemic's like probably the best thing that happened for my practice. Because couples.
Yeah, they were all locked in the house together. You have to actually deal with your spouse or your partner.
Yeah, it's a lot. I know. My husband continued to work, so I was grateful for that because I saw what other couples were going through, and that's a lot. It's tough. The other interesting thing I saw, I work with pretty high-end couples, and so a lot of my couples, someone in the relationship travels for work, and before the pandemic, they were never home, but they actually had like these really good relationships because they were maximizing the time together. And then all of a sudden they're home together all the time, and it was like they just like drifted apart. And they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, it's like quality over quantity, right? Like, so they had all the time in the world. They weren't really making any like quality time for each other. They started to take each other for granted. Whereas when the person was traveling, they only had maybe a day, 2 days together. They made a lot, they were present for that day or two. So that was like an interesting thing that came out of it.
My grandma would like to tell us a story where she had a friend and her husband was a truck driver. So every time he was on his way home, he would call his wife and let her know he's on his way home, so she could get whatever man that's in the house out the house when you get there.
That's a good practice. Preventing him from catching the case, I guess. But I thought when you were just saying the couple where the one spouse would travel, it truly sounds like absence does make the heart grow fonder.
I think it can if it's used properly. Like I certainly think in the opposite can be true also, but like I think for the couples I was seeing, and again, I wasn't seeing them before. I'm going off of their own sort of description of what their relationship was. They knew it was a challenge, and so they really put the effort into like making sure that their time together was really valuable and making sure to stay connected in whatever ways they were when the one person was traveling. And then when the person was home all the time, like they didn't need to do that anymore. They felt like they didn't need to do that anymore, and they just like drifted apart. But it was like not one couple. This was like a lot. Like I was hearing this like over and over again from like various couples. So yeah, I think it can work if couples are intentional. I think so much about relationships is intentionality. I mean, we have to be intentional in how we are in our relationships. And when we do that, like a lot of other stuff just kind of flows from there.
Has any of your clients ever mentioned infidelity to you, but not their spouse or their partner?
No, but I'm really clear about like sort of the guidelines. So I'm very straightforward from the get-go that like emotions or feelings are confidential. So if in the individual session, one partner tells me, that they aren't attracted to their partner, I'm not going to share that. But if they tell me that they cheated on their partner, they would either have to disclose it or I couldn't work with them. So secrets, I refer to as secrets. Secrets I cannot like hold, but I can hold feelings confidential.
Is that what you're supposed to do, or is that just your policy?
I mean, I think a lot of therapists have the same policy, but I don't think that there's like, it's not like a rule or something, but I think
Okay.
most people kind of practice the same way.
Do you guide couples in managing jealousy within open relationships?
Communication. You know, I think sometimes people think like jealousy is bad. I don't think any emotion is bad. It's what do you do with it that can be like a good or bad thing. So, you know, just really encouraging them to be able to talk about it openly and share how they're feeling. See if there are any ways within reason. I don't like control in relationships, but if there's any, you know, ways to just sort of lessen it a little bit. But just acknowledge that sometimes it comes up and talk about it.
How interracial relationships do you see common issues between them when they're coming into therapy, if you have any of those clients at all?
So I have had clients that from interracial relationships. Ironically, my brother and sister-in-law have an interracial relationship. So I see it more like from a personal perspective, than in work. But I think that there certainly can be some themes to the issues that come up. But I think a lot of times it's more related to other people. You know, it's not even so much the couple. It's like all the people that are like, yeah, society, families, you know, like the judgments from others, I think are like the bigger issue than, you know, the couple themselves. They're choosing each other. So I think a lot of times they're like okay with things. I have one, I think right now I just have one. And they've navigated it really with no issues at all, right? But they're older and they are at a stage in their lives where they really don't, you know, care what other people think or say. So they might just be more equipped to be able to like deal with things as they come up, maybe more so than a younger couple might be. But yeah, it can be challenging, but I think the challenges come from the chatter. I think it's less about the couple.
I don't have the statistics, but you got the experience. So I'm gonna ask you this: do interracial couples last longer than regular couples? That's same race couples.
I'm interested what the statistics say. You know, I could say there's part of me that could argue that I could think it could go in either direction. I think that there could be a lot of strength that can come through dealing with that adversity from the outside world together. Like if a couple is really communicating well and they're dealing with that as like us against the world sort of mentality, then that can actually be something that I could see would strengthen them as a couple. But then on the flip side, if they're not a strong couple, regardless of race, and then they're dealing with all that adversity, that could be something that could be challenging and it might divide them. So I think I'm curious what the data shows.
Are you looking it up now? He's looking it up now. Okay.
It says comparison across marriage cohorts revealed that overall interracial couples have higher rates of divorce, particularly from those that married during the late 1980s. A 2009 study by Sutton Zing and Jennifer Ron Cook also found that interracial couples were at increased risk of divorce.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that again, like it doesn't surprise me, but I think that there's part of me that wouldn't have been surprised if you said the reverse either. So, you know, I think look, it's true of any couple. It's like if you're as a couple strong, then you could deal with anything external, and anything external could actually have the power to make you stronger. But if you're not strong as a couple or you're not communicating well, and there might be, you know, communication things that are different, you know, sort of to go back to the original question you asked about like parents, like how parents play a role, you know, like how people are potentially raised different, you know, culturally, might impact how they communicate in their relationship. But I'm like I don't like statistics because I think that there's so much room for like this is why I didn't test well in school, because I felt like I could always argue the other side. You know, it's like I just think that there's like, you know, like it's hard to have a study that's like truly unbiased, like, or to have a collection of people that, you know, why are people signing up for a study? Like, what does that tell you about? Like, so I've never really been someone that's like overly consumed with the data points. But
Yeah,
that's interesting.
data can be very helpful, but it can also be very, very ineffective. It's good to have it there, but to your point, it's like, okay, well, why were they here? What were all the other details before you just tell me that they don't work out? But the question that I forgot was, have you ever worked with a couple who had an arranged marriage?
I did briefly, and then they stopped coming. So yeah, it was brief, fascinating, but brief.
Did you hear about the lady that killed everybody that forced her to marry somebody?
No, where was that?
And everybody that was involved with it, she unalived all of them. Now she on trial or something like that.
Wow. I mean, the thing about it is there's like this very small part of me that thinks like in theory, if the person is open to it, I could see how it could be like effective, right? But if the person, like, I think that there's so much coercion in those types of, they're not given the option. But if somebody's given the option, in the case that the couple that I worked with, she was not, and so I don't think she was happy. But I think that if both individuals are open to the idea of it, I think that there's like, I could see why it could work. You're taking all the people that know you the best, and if they're coming at it from that perspective, I should say, and it's not just like a, same economic level, like not like based on like things outside of just like, oh, this person might get along well with this person. Who better to kind of match you than the people that know you the best, if they're really coming at it from your best interest and not for like socioeconomic or societal reasons.
Okay, it says Pakistani woman unalived 18 and plot to poison husband after a forced marriage, police say. Pakistani police say a 21-year-old woman plot to poison her husband went wrong, and she ended up unaliving 17 other people.
So accidentally?
Yeah, accidentally she unalived other people. She's trying to get the husband though. But other people was involved the forced marriage.
Oh, they were involved at least.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, because if it was me, I'd be like, damn, I didn't even do anything. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but if it was family, like if it was like a family dinner, then obviously they would have been like, I wonder, that accidental part sounds like just a good defense. I don't buy it.
Yeah, it's Pakistan too, so
yeah, I'm thinking she was.
So I don't think they would be on her side,
Yeah, that's fair. That's
unless she wanted witnesses, unless she wanted to like. Wow, that's interesting. See, I could talk about crime stuff all day.
Any more questions?
No, but I think this was a very, very enlightening conversation. I've never spoken to or seen a couples therapist. I definitely believe in any type of therapy as long as it's, effective. Because what people label as therapy sometimes, I'm like, really? But, couples therapy, I think is very necessary. I think the biggest issue is people knowing that they need it and both people agreeing to it. Because it's not typically what you think about. I feel in society, we're not thinking about couples therapy. So appreciate the work that you do because you are, like people, especially, how do I say this? A lot of people have children and products of relationships that are unhealthy, whether that means you should divorce, you shouldn't, you can work it out, whatever it is, or you need to work on your communication, that affects so many other people down the line, who they date, who they marry, who they raise, with children they raise. So, I think this should be something that is free to all, but that's not how it works in the society. But again, appreciate the work that you do. You are very necessary. I don't know if anyone's told you otherwise, but you are.
I appreciate that. One other thing, like if I can just add to that, like if people are looking for couples therapists, like a lot of people who offer couples therapy don't actually have training in couples therapy. So you actually have to ask the questions and I think it's one of those, like, you don't know what you don't know. So a therapist can offer couples therapy just as a therapist. All of my training I sought outside of my master's program. So the only time that you're going to get somebody who's been trained is if they have an LMFT, which is they're a licensed marriage and family therapist. But otherwise, like any other degree, like you really want to ask them, like if they're a social worker or psychologist or a mental health clinician, like what is your specific training in couples therapy? Because they might not have any. They mean well, but they can do a
Right.
lot of damage. So it's definitely a different beast than individual therapy. So
There's not a law against that.
no, I mean, that's the problem. It's kind of like a problem in our field that it's not governed that way. I mean, it's the same thing with like things like substance abuse. Like people do get certified in substance abuse, but you don't necessarily have to. So I don't see clients for substance abuse, but I could. So yeah, there's a lot maybe in our field that needs to be like fixed. The other thing I would say is that, I think that there's a stigma around couples therapy, and I think it's very reactive instead of being proactive. And I think that if more people looked at it as a proactive approach, they wouldn't need it. They'd be using it for like, to solve problems before they exist. So.
Before we go, I want to play a little game. Pick somebody, either past, present, or future, that you could be for 1 year and come back with that knowledge. And what knowledge would you come back with?
Knowledge would you come back with? Are we all answering or just me?
Yes, we're all going to answer, yes.
Okay. Are you going? I think you should go first because you asked the
Okay,
question.
you want me to go
Right, yeah.
first? Okay, I always pick
Answer.
somebody biblical. This time I'm pick Moses. I want to know is he Akhenaten. And I want to bring back the knowledge, like what kind of information he got from God. Was he high? Did he really speak to God? Did he really see a bush that was on fire? So I want to know all this, and I would bring that back with me. Like, okay, yeah, there really is a God. Yeah, he spoke to me back then. And magic, I want to know his magic real. Because in the Bible, Moses threw his staff down and turned to a snake, and the other staff that became a snake. So I want to know his magic real too back.
Okay.
Went like deep. I was like,
Yeah, right. All right. So I think for completely different reasons, I would just want to be like Beyonce. And it's not, I just want to live her life and see if I actually want to, like, I think sometimes we look at celebrities' lives and we're like, oh my God, it's great. And it actually may not be, but if it could be temporary and I could come back and be like, nah, her life is really lit. Or I could be like, it's great when it's great. And then, I think that's really all it is. And then in the meantime, just benefit from all the richness and the money. But no, I think that's a hard question for me personally, because I feel like I do a really good job of seeing other people and what they do and saying, I don't need to try that to know that doesn't work. Or I just think I'm a little bit receptive, like within reason, of course, right? Like not everyone's journey is the same. But I just think it's not, for me, that's a hard question because I'm like that the knowledge is there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have access to a lot of things and we see a lot of things. So we may not have had to be around when, I don't know, Harriet Tubman was around, but we do see how people function now in similar, obviously not literal slave situations, but in similar situations. And we're like, I bet you that's how they were acting. So that's that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, that was a good answer. Well, I was going to go with my original one. I would want to be Anderson Cooper because I am obsessed with him because I like his Giggle Fest videos. But I just think he's covered so much of what happens in the world. And I would be curious, I guess, for the knowledge coming back base, like if there are things that like he does not share or is told he's not allowed to share, just like is there background information, which I assume that there is somewhere, somehow, but like on the stories that he covers that he's like not allowed to share in his, newscasting. But I think he's just like kind of has had a pretty interesting life and has been at pretty much every big historical event in our lifetime covering
That's a
it.
good
So.
one.
Want to hear a fact about Anderson Cooper?
Is it going to make me just like him?
Not really.
I love him.
It's only bad if you want to take it as bad, but his family was the people that basically owned Michelle Obama family in slavery. So they probably related somehow.
I did not know that. I knew that. I forget like what the family is, but his family is like a big name, and he like intentionally, which I always kind of admired him. Is it Vanderbilt? I thought I was going to say that. I thought it was wrong. But I think it's like admirable that at least how I've heard the story is that he like wanted to distance himself from the name because he wanted make it on his own. He didn't want to sort of make it because of his name. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I did not know that.
They probably related somehow. No.
I mean, regarding Anderson Cooper, if I were to, I may not want to go and be him and see his life, but I would love to partake in the New Year's Eve festivities every year because they look like they have a time.
Yeah. And Andy, like Cohen, they're like such good friends. Like they do look like they have a good time.
Yeah, best New Year's Eve ever. I would want to do that and then come back. But so when you mentioned him, I'm like, oh my God, he has the best New Year's Eve every year. I think last year they canceled it, or they said they couldn't drink or something like that. I'm like,
I think it was.
We like to see them drunk and giggling.
I know. I think like the year before, like maybe like Andy Cohen was like out of control or something, and that's like why that's what's like fun to watch, right? But man, you get that guy giggling, and it's just hysterical. Like he cannot control himself, and he literally sounds like
You're right. I like to meet him too. I think I went.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh yes, of course. Right. Thank you for joining us for an episode of our Relationship Combo podcast. We had a great time with licensed therapist Kendra Capalbo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Have a good day.
Have a good one. Wait, where are you right now? Where are you located right now? Rhode Island?
Connecticut. I'm in Connecticut.
Oh, Connecticut. Damn, sorry. Rhode Island was where you worked before. Okay, all right. Because I was gonna say what time is it over there, but it's the same time, so no big deal. Okay.
Where are you guys?
We're in New York.
We're in New York. We in Manhattan.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to do the game, want to do it in person, let us know. We can do this in person.
Yeah, we can tailor it. We can talk about different things, but no, we liked your energy. Sorry?
Prison talk?
Yeah. No, seriously. Yes, thank you. And we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you guys so much.
Sure. Good night.